Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about preventing management problems by focusing students on learning, part 1. The objectives of studying these lessons are to understand the significance of managing classroom, to understand and prevent the basic management problems faced by the teacher in the classrooms, to make appropriate physical, visual and spatial arrangement in the classrooms that would provide a comfortable learning environment for students, to establish rules in classrooms to be meticulously and responsibly followed by the students for smooth functioning of the class, to structure the lessons and activities in a way that would benefit the students in learning. Significance of classroom management. Managing the learning environment is both a major responsibility and an ongoing concern for all teachers, even those with years of experience. There are several reasons. In the first place, a lot goes on in classrooms simultaneously, even when students seem to be doing only one task in common. 25 students may all seem to be working on a sheet of maths problem, but look more closely, several may be stuck on a particular problem, each for different reasons. A few others have worked only the first problem or two and are now chatting quietly with each other instead of continuing. Still others have finished and are wondering what to do next. Such diversity increases even more if the teacher deliberately assigns multiple activities to different groups or individuals. For example, if some students do a reading assignment while others do the math problems. Another reason that managing the environment is challenging is because a teacher cannot predict everything that will happen in a class. A well-planned lesson may fall flat on its face or take less time than expected, and you find yourself improvising to fill the class time. On the other hand, an unplanned movement may become a wonderful sustained exchange among students and prompt the teacher to drop previous plans and follow the flow of discussion. Interruptions happen continually. A fire drill, a drop-in visit from another teacher or the principal, a call on the intercom from the office. An activity may indeed turn out well, but also rather differently than you intended. Therefore, have to decide how, if at all, to adjust the next day's lesson to allow for this surprise. What the teacher intend as encouragement for a shy student may seem to the student herself or himself like forced participation. An eager outgoing classmate watching the teacher's effort to encourage the shy student, moreover, may not see the teacher as either encouraging or coercing, but as overlooking or ignoring other students who already want to participate. The variety of perception can lead to surprises in students' responses. Most often small ones, but occasionally major. Instead, students' presence is just a sign that an opportunity exists for teachers to motivate students to learn. Some students, of course, do enjoy learning and being in school, almost regardless of what teachers do. Others do enjoy school, but only because teachers have worked hard to make classroom life pleasant and interesting. Fortunately, it is possible to earn this sort of commitment from many students, and this lesson describes ways of doing so. We begin with ways of preventing management problems from happening by increasing students' focus on learning. The methods include ideas about arranging classroom space, about establishing procedures, routines and rules, and about communicating the importance of learning to students and parents. After these prevention-oriented discussions, we can look at ways of refocusing students when and if their minds or actions stray from the tasks at hand. As you probably know from being a student, bringing students back on task can happen in many ways, and the ways vary widely in the energy and persistence required of the teacher. We try to indicate some of these variations, but because of space limitations and because of the richness of classroom life, we cannot describe them all. preventing management problems by focusing students on learning. The easiest management problems to solve are ones that do not happen in the first place. Even before the school year begins, behavioral problems can be minimized by arranging classroom furniture and materials in ways that can encourage a focus on learning as much as possible. Arranging classroom space. Viewed broadly, classrooms may seem to be arranged in similar ways, but there are actually important alternatives arrangement to consider. Variations exist because of grade level, the subjects taught, the teacher's philosophy of education, and of course the size of the room and the furniture available. Whatever the arrangement is chosen, it should help students to focus on learning tasks as much as possible and minimize the chances of distractions. Beyond these basic principles, however, the best arrangement depends on what students need and on the kind of teaching that teachers prefer and feel able to provide. Displays and wall space. All classrooms have walls, of course, and how they are filled can affect the mood or feeling of a classroom. Ample displays make a room interesting and can be used to reinforce curriculum goals and display and hence publicly recognize students' work. But too many displays can also make a room seem busy or distracting as well. If teacher is starting a new school year, then a good strategy is to decorate some of the wall or bulletin board space, but not to fill it all immediately. Leaving some space open leaves flexibility to respond to ideas and curriculum needs that emerge after the year is underway. Computers in the classroom. As we can find out, with the majority of teachers, they will only have one computer in a classroom or at most just a few, and their placement may be predetermined by the location of power and cable outlets. If so, teacher needs to think about computer placement early in the process of setting up a room. Once the location of computers is set, locations for desk, high usage shelves and other movable items can be chosen more sensibly in general, so as to minimize distraction to students and to avoid unnecessary traffic congestion. Visibility of and interaction with students. Learning is facilitated if the furniture and space allow you or the teacher to see all students and to interact with them from a comfortable distance. Usually, this means that the main central part of the room, where desks and tables are usually located, needs to be as open and as spacious as possible. While this idea may seem obvious, enacting it can be challenging in the practice if the room itself is small or shaped unusually. In classrooms with young students from kindergarten, furthermore, open space tend to allow, if not invite, physical movement of children. A feature that teacher may consider either constructive or annoying depending on the teacher's educational goal and the actual level of activity that occurs. Spatial arrangements unique to grade level or subjects. The best room arrangement sometimes depends on the grade level or subject area of the class. If it is in elementary school, for example, the teacher may need to think especially about where students can keep their daily belongings such as bags and lunch boxes, etc. In some schools, these can be kept outside the classroom, but not necessarily. Some subjects and grade levels furthermore lend themselves especially well to small group interactions, in which case the teacher might prefer not to seat students in rows but instead around small group tables or work areas. The latter arrangement is sometimes preferred by elementary teachers but is also useful in high schools wherever students need lot of counter space, as in some shops or art courses. The key issue in deciding between tables and rows, however, is not grade level or subject as such, but the amount of small group interaction that the teacher wants to encourage compared to the amount of whole group interaction. As a rule, tables make working with peers easier and rows make listening to the teacher more likely, and group work slightly more awkward physically. Floating is especially likely for specialized teachers, example music teacher in elementary school, who move from class to class, and in schools have an overall shortage of classrooms. Floating can sometimes be annoying to the teacher, though it actually also has advantages such as not having to take responsibility for how other teachers' rooms are arranged. If the teacher finds oneself floating, it helps to consider a few key strategies, such as consider using a permanent cart to move crucial supplies from room to room, making sure that everyone of that room has an overhead projector. Do not count on using chalkboard or computers in other teachers' rooms. Talk to the other teachers about having at least one shelf or corner in each room designated for your exclusive use. Establishing daily procedures and routine procedures are specific ways of doing common repeated classroom tasks or activities. Examples include checking daily attendance, dealing with students who arrive late, or granting permission to leave the classroom for an errand. Academically related procedures include ways of turning in daily homework, example, of gaining the teacher's attention during quiet seat work, example, raising the hand and waiting, and of starting a free choice activity after completing a classroom assignment. They are only indirectly about what is ethically right or ethically desirable to do. Most procedures or routines can be accomplished in more than one way, with only minor differences in outcomes. There is more than one way, for example, for the procedure of taking attendance. The teacher could call the roll, delegate a student to call the roll, or note students' presence on a seating chart. Each variation accomplishes essentially the same task, and the choice may be less important than the fact that the class coordinates its actions somehow by committing to some sort of choice. For teachers, of course, an initial management task is to establish procedures and routines as promptly as possible. Other teachers prefer to invite input from students when creating procedures, like asking the class, "What do you feel is the best way for students to get my attention during a quiet reading time?" Simply announcing key procedures saves time and ensures consistency in case the teacher teach more than one class. But it puts more responsibility on the teacher to choose procedures that are truly reasonable and practical. Inviting students' input, on the other hand, can help students to become aware of and committed to procedures, but at the cost of requiring more time to settle on them. It also risks creating confusion if the teacher teaches multiple classes, each of which adopts different procedures. Establishing classroom rules. Unlike procedures or routines, rules express standards of behavior for which individual students need to take responsibility. Although they are like procedures in that they sometimes help in ensuring the efficiency of classroom tasks. Most educational experts recommend keeping the number of rules to a minimum in order to make them easier to remember. A second feature is that they are stated in positive terms, do X, rather than negative terms, do not do Y. A strategy that emphasizes and clarifies what students should do rather than what they should avoid. A third feature is that each rule actually covers a collection of more specific behaviors. The rule brings all materials to class, for example, covers bringing pencils, papers, textbooks, homework papers, and permission slips, depending on the situation. As a result of their generality, rules often have a degree of ambiguity that sometimes requires interpretation. Infractions may occur that are marginal or in a gray area rather than clear cut. A student may bring a pen, for example, but the pen may not work properly. Teacher may therefore wonder whether this incident is really a failure to follow the rule or just an unfortunate and in this case a minor fault of the pen manufacturer. As with classroom procedures, rules can be planned either by the teacher alone or by the teacher with advice from students. The arguments for each approach are similar to the arguments for procedures. Rules laid on by the teacher may be more efficient and consistent, and in this sense more fair, but rules influenced by the students may be supported more fully by the students. Because rules focus strongly on personal responsibility, however, there is a stronger case for involving students in making them than in making classroom procedures. Brookfield 2006, Kohn 2006. In any case, the question of who plans classroom rules is not necessarily an either or choice. It is possible in principle to impose certain rules on students. For example, always be polite to each other, but let the students determine the consequences for violation of certain rules. For example, if a student is discourteous to a classmate, he or she must apologize to the student in writing. Some mixture of influences is probably inevitable, in fact, if only because the class needs to take into account the teacher's own moral commitments as the teacher as well as any imposed by the school. One of the best ways to prevent management problem is by pacing and structuring lessons or activities as smoothly and continuously as possible. This goal depends on three major strategies: selecting tasks or activities at an appropriate level of difficulty for the student, providing a moderate level of structure or clarity to what student about what they are supposed to do, especially during transitions between activities, keeping alert to the flow and interplay of behaviors for the classes as a whole and for individuals within it. To summarize this chapter, classroom management is the coordination of lessons and activities to make learning as productive as possible. It is important because classrooms are complex and somewhat unpredictable, because students respond to teachers' action in diverse ways, and because society requires that students attend school. There are two major features of management, that is preventing problems before they occur and responding to them after they occur. Many management problems can be prevented by attending to how classroom space is used, by establishing daily procedures, routines and rules, by pacing and structuring activities appropriately, and by communicating the importance of learning and of positive behavior to students and parents. Because students respond to teachers' action in diverse ways, and because society requires that students attend school. There are two major features of management: preventing problems before they occur and responding to them after they occur. There are several ways of dealing with a management problem after it occurs, and the choice depends on the nature of the problem. There are several ways of dealing with a management problem after it occurs, and the choice depends on the nature of the problem. A teacher can simply ignore misbehavior, gestures, or cue students non-verbally, rely on natural and logical consequences, or engage conflict resolution strategies. Whatever tactics the teacher uses, it is important to keep in mind that their ultimate purpose is to make learning possible and effective.